Hey everyone, Alex here coming at you on a Thursday afternoon. I just wanted to come on and do a little video. I just had my 9th anniversary here in the vinyl community. I first posted my intro video to the vinyl community in September of 2016. And yeah, I moved from Chicago to California in 2014. And yeah, I decided to make my first video not too long after that. My original channel name was Motoric 247, and that's kind of the first record I'll show here. This Harmonia record, I think from 1974 on the Brain label. So you know, my channel name at the time, Motoric 247, a direct reference to my exploration into, you know, progressive German music, so-called krautrock, and you know, one of the first channels I ever encountered, you know, was Derek Higgins' channel, and you know, he at the time, especially, you know, 9-10 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever I first started watching YouTube videos and about vinyl specifically and about krautrock, he was definitely one of the first channels that you would come by. You know, he had documented very early on his krautrock collection. I think he always told the story of some young kids that had, I think they were military kids, had spent a bunch of time in Germany, brought back a bunch of these you know, at the time very obscure, you know, German records, and they gave a bunch to Derek. Possibly, I know he has this one. I wonder if that was one of the original copies that he got from those kids back then. But yeah, you know, Derek's channel, you know, I still watch him from time to time. He's still showing great music, still buying and exploring new music, and you know, digging into his vast collection. Highly influential, not just to me, but to many others that you know, are curious. And you know, that's what brought me to the vinyl community in the first place, where it was to satisfy and to explore some of those curiosities, you know, especially about, you know, music that might be outside of the mainstream, you know, like this. So when I started my channel, it was in direct response to Fred over in Australia, Big Star 1000. You know, one of the most prolific and interesting channels and longest running channels in the vinyl community. He's taking some breaks here and there, but you know, he's been around for well over 10 years. And yeah, this is a record I remember he did a series. You know, it was, you know, his famous Give Me 10 series, where he would showcase 10 different records, either of a different year or a different genre. I think this was in his you know, best of 1980, Young Marble Giants, minimal post-punk from Wales. Yeah, definitely a record that is very much, you know, very much reminds me of Fred every time I pull it. I know he showed it many times, and has always been a big champion of it, in addition to many other records. But like I said, just trying to pull a few here. You know, of course, you know, Chris Cole, you know, possibly my biggest influence, you know, throughout the years, and just an incredible human being, and just a wealth of knowledge, and yeah, just incredible. And I remember very specifically, he played this record on a video years ago, and yeah, it was very hard to pay attention for the duration of the video, because the music was so enthralling, so mysterious. This is a record from I think it was 1977, I think. The group is called Yaki Kandru. It's a duo from Colombia, and I think I've played this record on a stream. I don't know if I've ever talked about it. Duo from Colombia, basically doing a modern take of like sort of pre-Hispanic, you know, tribal percussive, you know, chants, but completely timeless music. So from the moment he started playing that, I was like, man, I have to find out what this is and what's going on. Here's the group. I guess it's a larger ensemble as well, but I think it's the main composers or a duo. You can see all the pre-Hispanic instruments there. It's still around. I mean, it's not easy to find, but it's still relatively out there. Highly recommended. And yeah, Chris, if you know his channel, rush over there. And yeah, this one from Carm. His channel is Gorgvo 31, another channel that I think he started probably around the same time that I did, maybe a little bit before that. He's a good friend of Chris Cole's as well, and in fact, I remember early on they did some videos where they were both on screen. They're both in the Chicago suburbs, and yeah, Carm always been fascinating, and we share a lot of passion for a lot of composers and musicians, and Terry Riley's definitely among them. I remember he did a feature, I think, I can't remember the name of the feature. He would do, like, I think it was like touchstones. He would do kind of, records that were really important to him, or in this case, I think it was, this record was his introduction to Terry Riley's music, back probably in the 80s. I can't remember exactly when, but yeah, this one is recorded in like 75 in Berlin. There's Terry. Terry's still with us. I think he just turned 90, I think. Getting up there, but still making music, and thankfully still with us. This is on the Kukuk label, Descending Moonshine Dervishes. Kind of hard to read there, but yeah, I'll leave a link. Carm did a great video, again, talking about this record, and yeah, I love the way that Carm, how he explains complex or abstract music, especially. I've always looked up to his, very specific choices of words. Even though they're not necessarily like, it's not like music theory that he's spouting at you, but at the same time, he can really express what something sounds like without having to, just his descriptions. So, yeah, Carm, a big influence for sure. Next channel is Infinite Sound. Jamie, up there in Scotland. I was lucky to get to meet him a couple of years ago when he was in the U.S. And yeah, primarily focused on jazz, but has shown a ton of other things, many of which I'm very interested in, including ethnographic music and monoclassical music. But yeah, I remember Jamie showed this Andrew Hill record years ago, and I don't think I had it at the time. I'm pretty sure this accelerated my pursuit for this record, of course, from 1967. Compulsion, very dark, percussive. Yeah, pretty much one of my absolute favorite records on Blue Note. And also featuring Natty Kamar, who I'll talk about some other time, but he is a great percussionist, and with African instruments specifically, his he built his own sort of African finger piano instruments and did some records. So yeah, one of the greats on Blue Note. Again, I'll leave a link to all these channels if you don't know him. Jamie made a video about a year ago. He's not been too active lately, but I'm sure he'll be back at some point. A great channel for sure. Alright, so it's hard for me to pull this record out and not think about my good friend Dave, local Bandography. our taste in jazz, we have a lot of overlap, of course, with free improvised music, free jazz, all that stuff. And yeah, this is one that I actually was a little surprised that he was very interested in. I mean, I think I found out about this record because of this guy, Pozar, drummer, percussionist, who worked with a lot of jazz musicians like Bill Dixon in New York, and this is like his one of his few solo record. Yeah, I think his only solo record. A very very interesting with electronics, percussion, overdubs, pretty wild stuff. And but anyway, this is a record that Dave had been pursuing for a long time, and I like to tease him about it, because it always seemed to be just out of reach. Of course, a good friend Chris Cole eventually found a copy for him, and but yeah, I always think about Dave, and I'm sure you all know his channel by now. And then of course, you gotta talk about Stunty. One of the first videos that he ever made, and the one that sticks out in my mind, was him out in the fields in the countryside of Sweden. There, he had a portable record player. Again in the middle of the woods, and just started pulling these incredible records I'd never heard of. I remember this one very specifically, a very striking cover. And this is actually how I found out about that band that I talked about in my last video, Magia. This is, I think this one came afterward, I think. I can't remember which one came first, this one or the one I showed last time, but so I mean, he was playing, so he was playing the records and describing them, and again, the whole vibe of that video really kind of blew me away, and I was definitely hooked from then on. And I'll show another one that I kind of felt like, when I think of Stunty, I felt like I had to show this one too. So over the years, we've exchanged records, traded. Sometimes I'll get things for him that are hard for him to get in Europe, things like that. And this is one that that I bought, for him years ago. A copy popped up on Discogs, and I was able to get it, and I shipped it to an address that he has in the U.S. In fact, I think to this day he doesn't have this record in his possession. This is a copy I found a couple of years ago when it popped up again. Very, as you can imagine, very obscure, and a fascinating record. I think this is from like the 90s. This is a recordings from 1984 of this like religious cult in Montana. And it's absolutely fascinating. I'll have to play it sometime, but it's sort of indescribable. I mean, there's a lot of, it's basically, recordings throughout, one of these, gatherings, very much like a, like a church type gathering that they had. And it was called the Church Universal and Triumphant. And I guess Elizabeth Clare Prophet, this woman, is one of the cult leaders. And but anyway, especially on side 2, you get into these repetitive like chants that are just amazing, and just creates this. They're just. I mean, it sounds like they're looping, and it's like they're like in a trance, and they're just repeating, this short phrase over and over and over and over again. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Very difficult one to track down, but if you're interested in that kind of weirdness. So thank you, Stunty, for introducing me to that one. had to talk about Sherv over a channel, Julius Jabar. Of course, a huge influence on me and his knowledge of jazz and blues and many other things. Always amazes, and I get to hang out with him at least a few times a year, and hopefully more now that he's retired. But he lives about an hour away from here. But yeah, I remember talking to Sherv about Sonny Simmons. I think the day that he passed, I think I can't remember the exact circumstances, but basically I think either I was listening to Sonny or he was listening to Sonny, and then we kind of broke the news that he had passed. And then I also think about Sherv when I pull this one, because when I made that thread about the John Coltrane Memorial project, this is one that he pulled because there's a track here, Coltrane in Paradise, the first track in dedication of John Coltrane. I also love this record because of Barbara Donald, who's married to Sonny Simmons, one of the very few women in free jazz at all, and especially playing the trumpet. I mean, there's just very few examples of women that were involved in that movement. This is from 1969. Of course, Sonny is from the West Coast originally, spent a bunch of time in New York, eventually came back. In fact, I think they met in San Diego at a jazz club. And so yeah, this is actually recorded in Berkeley, even though it's called Manhattan Egos. But yeah, certainly musically it's very much owes a lot to the very early sort of post-Coltrane, pre-loft jazz scene in New York. A great one. And finally, of course, had to include Dom seeking a thread in the video. This is Daniel Hetch. I can't remember where this is from. Of course, Private Press, so-called primitive guitarist. I can't remember much of his whole story, and kind of like it that way. It's kind of a very mysterious record, and it was just reissued not too long ago. But yeah, so Dom and I have done a bunch of streams throughout the years. Haven't done one in a little while, but yeah, basically sort of playing music back and forth, live and stuff like that. A lot of fun. And I specifically remember him playing this record on one of those streams. I think it was one of those streams, unless it was like one of the sales streams. But anyway, really caught my ear. Certainly owes a lot to Fahey and Basho, of course, who Dom is a big fan of. But yeah, I loved. Had to track this one down eventually. Daniel Hetch, guitar from 1970 something. And then finally, I'll just show this one. This is the record that I was playing, and this kind of ties into Chris Cole and Stunty and just finding out about stuff that you never knew existed. This might be the most obscure and rarest record that I have. Pretty sure Chris Cole had mentioned it a long time ago. He does not have a copy, and sometimes that's part of the fun, right? It's just not just learning about the records that you're showing on the VC, but actually having conversations about the records that you don't have and that that exist, that you hope to one day come across, and this is one of them. This is Bob Bates. It's a 1979 recording. Private Press. I think it's numbered out of 150. So this is recorded not far from here, about 30 miles south of here, is Chapman University in Orange, California. I think he still lives in LA, so kind of a local record. But you know, if you could hear the music that was playing, this is what it was being played on. So he calls it the, let me see if I can pull the insert here. Here's a little handmade insert that kind of explains the thing, but essentially it's an instrument that he built that he's calling the fuser. And it's built for two people, and you can kind of see in the picture here. So there's two chairs on either side of this very strange looking, yeah, almost reminiscent of, you know, of a Harry Parch, you know, invention. And I don't know at all how it works or anything like that. Obviously, it at times sounds like some version of a guitar or something like that, but you know, very metallic and haunting, and yeah, just an incredible oddball record that yeah, was happy to finally find a copy about a year or so ago. Haven't really shown it, but again, that's the insert with a little description, and then it comes with this really cool kind of printed inner sleeve. So yeah, that's that. 20 minutes, way too long, but yeah, glad to have been here for 9 years. I'll continue to be here as long as I am inspired by all of you out there. There's many other channels that I didn't talk about here, you know, and many that don't exist and that haven't existed for a long time. And yeah, of course, when I talk about Fred, you know, I have to talk about James Buttery and Campo, who are, you know, were at one point all in Australia, and sort of, in my mind, sort of like a collective of sorts. And so, you know, those guys are all sort of in a group for me. But anyway, yeah, love to hear your comments, and take care.